Welcome to A Fresh Face in Hell. I'm your host, Jonathan Evison. Every week we talk to someone new and interesting, somebody intellectually curious, somebody who will hopefully renew our faith in this cold, cruel world we live in. A Fresh Face in Hell. So, as a novelist, through 10 novels now, I basically have one overriding theme. There's a few ancillary themes in there, masculinity in crisis, that we are the sum of small moments, which is to say that our lives are more sinew than bone. But overall, my one major theme is this. As human beings, we need each other. As I put it in Legends of the North Cascades, bereaved we are but orphans, dispossessed, impoverished in our solitude. Our only buffer against the cold, cruel world is one another. Or in the heart of winter. For setting aside all our differences, acknowledging the forces intent on tearing us apart, all we have to distinguish ourselves from nothingness, to buffer us from the inevitable ruin, is each other. Look, human beings, we're not apex predators. We need each other. We depend on each other. We yearn for connection. Me, I never use the self-checkout. I hate automated directories, and AI is killing me because for all its wonderful applications and myriad resources, it lacks that human connection. Even if it is an amalgam of human endeavor, it's just not the same. Today we're going to talk to Allison Pugh, who wrote The Last Human Job, The Work of Connecting in a Disconnected World, which is a compelling exploration of the vital role human connection plays in our professional lives, especially as automation and artificial intelligence increasingly permeate various sectors. Allison, welcome to the show, and thanks for being our fresh face in hell this week.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
In your book, you talk about connective labor. Can you give our listeners an overview of what connective labor is?
Sure. Connective labor is the work of seeing the other person and having that person feel seen. And it underlies so many different occupations, from therapy to teaching to primary care to journalism for sure.
Yeah, you even mentioned hair salons.
Hair salons.
My
Yeah.
barber, Chuck, has been cutting my hair for 50 years, okay?
Yeah.
When I
I'm
was a
sure
little
he does
kid,
this.
when I was a little kid, he was called Chuck the Young Guy. He worked at Sandy's Barber, and he was like 25 years old. And Sandy was such an old grump, nobody wanted to have Sandy cut his hair. So that place would be
Yeah.
full. There'd be like 8 kids in the line, and Sandy's chair would be empty, and he'd go, next.
Aw.
And the people would go, no, they just put their eyes down, go, I'm waiting for Chuck. I'm waiting for the young guy. I'm waiting for the young guy. And he still, to this day, 50 years later, cuts my hair. We have nothing in common. I never talk about politics with him. I never,
Uh-huh.
we don't, it's not even really that substantive, but that connection is still meaningful. That long, that just I don't know, I guess I'm a big believer in continuity. And those relationships are small.
Yeah.
Yeah, and not long ago, we had legendary sports writer Joe Posnanski on the show, and we talked about sabermetrics and how they've changed sports, in particular baseball, how they've come to outweigh those traditional and tangible qualities like grit and team chemistry. We're drowning in analytics, right? Which is, they're great tools to be sure, but what do we lose when we lean so hard on them?
Yeah. I have relatives who do data analytics. My nephew works for the Marlins, but
And
I would,
they're the cutting edge.
yeah, yeah. He's great at what he does, and there is a time and a place for analytics. I'm a sociologist. I'm not against data as um, as a matter of principle. It's just that it's really become a fad, a management fad that has been implemented without regard for the costs, and the costs are considerable. So we've let data analytics drive the bus rather than, say, relationship and connection, and those have suffered as a result.
Yeah, let's talk about specifically some of those losses. I just talked
Hmm.
about my relationship with my barber, but therapy.
Yeah. Actually, it's true in almost every field. So, as a part of my research for this book that I wrote, I spent 5 years interviewing and observing all kinds of practitioners in this connective labor. So, yes, teachers and doctors and therapists, but also, as we said, hairdressers and home healthcare aides and sex workers and all kinds of people who rely on relationship. And more often than not, they were really facing an extreme pressure to collect data. And we ask the very same people who are in charge of doing the relationship to collect the data. So, a classic example, I talked to many primary care physicians who had showed me they were very proud of how they, were able to like type on the computer but still look at the patient. And they've developed that kind of facility because that's what we've been asking them to do. And so they feel like they're drowning in data requirements. And it's also being imposed by a system that doesn't care about what they think is really important, which is that they establish a connection with the client or the patient.
This as a guy who spent a lot of time in the ER the last couple of years, this totally tracks with me.
Mm,
And also,
mhm.
what do we lose when it's like talking to my kids at the dinner table, and if they get their phone up, I'm like, or we'll watch a movie together and they'll have their phones, and I'm like, "Come on, man, you're not paying attention." Like when we split our attention that way, even in half, and even this, like, I have a character in the novel I'm writing now, which is about a grief group on Wednesdays called Wednesday Night Lights. And
Mhm.
during the pandemic, he refuses to do his therapy because he feels a disconnect even with like, Zoom medicine.
Yeah.
Like
Wow. Mhm.
there's degrees to this. I mean, like we lose a little immediacy when we're not in the same room.
Mhm. I mean, it's absolutely true. People feel really disconnected. I ended up wanting to give a name for it because I felt like we spend so much time talking about loneliness, and loneliness is not quite it. I thought we need something for the feeling like a number, feeling rather invisible. And so I called it a depersonalization crisis. I think we are facing that. I think increasingly people feel not just lonely, like, it's not just, "I don't have enough friends," but it's actually like, "I feel like no one sees me." And that's true, or that's stemming from this, kind of data imperative where people are being forced to kind of collect data about you instead of seeing you and interacting with you as a person, but it's also related to automation and the spread of AI.
Yeah, this is all right in my wheelhouse, as I was saying at the top. I mean, this is all to me, this is the most fundamental aspect of the human condition is that we rely
Mhm.
so deeply on each other. Other mammals do as well, but there's so many different ways to frame loneliness, you know what I mean? I mean, like, Manhattan can
Mhm.
be the loneliest place in the world, and you're surrounded by
Mhm.
a crush of humanity, and
Mhm.
it's because of this, what you call the depersonalization crisis, and it just gets worse when we add these mediating forces like screens into it.
Mhm. And when you talk about the data getting in the way, like, the person who comes to mind among the people that I talked to, this woman who served as a, intake counselor, an intake psychologist at a VA hospital,
So she does the
and
pre-interviews.
she does the pre-interviews, right, and she was just telling me how impersonal, the hospital kind of made that exchange. So she remembered, talking to a veteran who had not come in before and who was, in some kind of psychological crisis, and she's seeing him, and she's supposed to get through that process in about 15 minutes. And they've given her a questionnaire to, move her along. And so she says, "He just shut down when I got to the gun part." And the gun part is I think it's question number 18 on this, survey that she's supposed to deliver, in which she's asking about his suicidal ideation and whether or not he has the means. And she said it just, the scripted nature of their interaction, which was being kind of pushed by the hospital, not because the hospital is nefarious, but because they have efficiency pressures and they're going to impose that on the therapist or on this psychologist. And so, in a misguided kind of priority given to data, they've essentially really destroyed that connection that they could have had that would have kind of gotten him the care that he needed. And she was just going on about it. She's like, "I'm not gonna be like, 'Come back in 3 weeks, great to see you,' you know? I need to have that the room to achieve a spontaneous connection." So she said she actually ditched the survey entirely and spent much more time than she was supposed to, and she was just like, "I have to give the whole of me to this work. I can't just do it by this scripting." And it was a very powerful example for me, listening to her kind of in the front lines of the collision between her desire to connect and the hospital's desire to move it along.
It just seems like as a culture, we need to roll back efficiencies, you know? I
Mhm.
mean, I just there we lose so much when we just try to hurry things along, and when we try
Mhm.
efficiency is just overrated. And like, look at algorithms, for instance. Like, they're effective profiling tools. We get that, but they've always lacked something for me. And I often use the example of independent booksellers because I've seen it firsthand in decades of work. I started on the bookstore floor long before I was a novelist, and I understand what really drives the cultural conversations about books. And it's not publicity, it's not advertising, it's not this algorithmic voodoo, but it's those human beings in the neighborhood brick and mortar bookstore that set the hand in your book, who evangelize for the book that they love, who personally connected with the book and tried to pass that personal connection on to this other human being. Um, do you believe it's possible for algorithms to ever emulate genuine human connection? I mean, I know AI talks to you now and people are buying sex robots, but I mean, is is that the way I think a sector of the population sees that as a way forward. I mean, the Elon Musks and the Jeff Bezoses of the world, I think they can actually see a world where us and AI are just become one thing.
Yeah, that's definitely the plan for a sector of Silicon Valley for sure. They're trying to um, push these algorithms to become our friends and our therapists and our companions. They're definitely this is the next frontier for them, and they are aided and abetted by the kind of human propensity to project feeling onto machines. And there's a lot of research that says that we do that. We tend to do it. And so,
Well, we do it with
um,
dogs, so
we do it with
yeah.
dogs, but even inanimate objects, there's military studies that show that people feel, soldiers feel sorrow when the bomb sniffing robot gets exploded. Like they project feeling onto inanimate objects, for decades that we've been doing that. But also in terms of the ones that have text response, that now is nearly human in its syntax, those really push our buttons so that we we feel seen when the machine, the AI is just saying like one or two things, and then we're like, oh, it really sees us, and we trust machines more. We think they aren't as judgmental. We think they're safer. There's all these things that we project onto machines that is makes us very vulnerable to the big plan that is coming out of Silicon Valley right now. I would say the danger here, just to spell it out, is that that's not another human being. And there's a couple of dangers. Number one, the dangers we already know. They're biased. They provide an enormous amount of surveillance, and they do a lot of job disruption. So the people, the people whose jobs they are automating are going to be out of work. Those are kind of the standard things that you hear about AI and its dangers, and those are real. I'm not saying they're not real, but the other thing that we're not really talking about is when we automate relationship, we really degrade human to human connection. And human
Yes.
connections have intrinsic value. And they have that value even though humans make mistakes, they're messy, they're chaotic, they sometimes are
Because
judgmental.
of all these things. I would go one further and say it's because of all these things. There's
I completely agree.
the old adage that we like people for their strengths, but we love them for their weaknesses. I mean, this is
Beautiful.
what being human is
Yes.
recognizing our shared flaws and, just collectively trying to be better. I mean, it's a that's that's the pathway for humanity. I all through looking at your research and what you just said about the robot sniffing, the bomb sniffing I kept
Yeah.
thinking of Wally. That and
Yeah.
the great. I mean, because I just
Yeah.
he's so you give something big eyes like that, and immediately you're like, oh, and he is
Yeah.
so sweet. And but then I just think of all those fat people that can't walk in the chairs, and you're like, I
Yeah.
mean, is this our future? Like, what is the end game? What is the corporate end game for AI if it's going to replace all our jobs, which means, what's gonna
Yeah.
drive the behemoth of, late capitalism if nobody has any money because they don't have a job? I really don't see politicos or billionaires cooking up a universal livable wage
Basic
for everybody.
income.
But they're gonna
Yeah.
suck every bit of air they can. So,
Yeah.
like, what is their end game? Like, okay, everybody, none of us have a job, none of us have money. Who's gonna buy all your shit that's making you rich? I mean,
Yeah.
what is
Yeah.
the end
Yeah.
game?
Well, I mean, I asked engineers that when I talked to them because they were also part of my research. I talked to the people who do this work, the therapists, the doctors, etc. But I was also interested in who was trying to impose systems on it, and that included AI engineers. So this started in like 2015, and I interviewed a whole bunch of them and observed them at work. And most of them, I would say, do not have they're not, kind of, they don't have a 40-year plan for for society. But when you ask them, like, they really saw the disruption possible of AI early, and they were true believers. They often would say, like, AI will soon be able to do anything a human does. Now, they were kind of on the edge of that. You and I might disagree, but they really believed in that. So I was like, well, if that's true, then what's left for us? And they were saying, first of all, universal basic income was their number one reply.
Show me
Like,
one point in human history where the people that have all the wealth and the resources have been that, benevolent
yeah,
with,
yeah. I mean, it's just going down that path for 1 second. It's actually a really interesting kind of policy recommendation that gathers both the far right and the far left, I would say. But it doesn't, to me, I share your skepticism because it doesn't feel like it relies on any kind of historical, understanding of US politics in particular because we have such an anemic welfare state. So I'll believe that when I
it
see
sounds
it.
like
But
communism, right? I mean, 50% of the population is gonna say it sounds like communism.
and the other thing, not just will we give away the money, but also that's really accepting, that work becomes a luxury and available only for, I guess, the, kind of engineers I was talking to. And in this country, work is really much more like a religion. You get dignity from it. You kind of express, you kind of enact citizenship claims because you work, and that happens up and down the class ladder. So, are we really going to evaporate work and all that it means in this country in particular? I mean, maybe I'm I'm open, but it doesn't look that possible. We have, kind of a distaste for social welfare and a kind of addiction to work as a moral,
Yeah, right,
force.
bootstrapperism is, free.
Exactly,
I
and
mean,
both
de
of those make
Tocqueville pointed it out in the, early 18th century, like, I mean,
exactly. So
yeah.
and so both of those make UBI, universal basic income, seem more unlikely to me. But there is some futures that I think, more near-term futures that I think are happening. And what I can't decide is which one is really happening, but I see 3 in front of us right now.
Please, I would like to hear these.
One is, one is what I call the triage future. So that's where AI or, bots handle the easy cases, and then humans handle the more complex cases. And this is definitely happening in, say, this is what happens when you are managed by a chatbot in any kind of consumer relations, and then you're like shouting into the phone, like agent, agent, to try and get to the human.
Yes.
That's that's the triage future, and the idea is that would just apply writ large, and that is quite plausible to me. Another very plausible future that you can see happening right now is a kind of inequality future where rich people get personal, artisanal, connective labor from a human being who themselves might get it from a bot, like from where it's a really sharp stratification of human contact, where low income people get the services of a chatbot because it's better than nothing. So we see that happening right now. I mean, that happens right now in education. You'll have like a low income school not able to find teachers, kind of resorting to, um, a chatbot or, kind of math or English being taught by website or whatever, or software program. And meanwhile, in the private schools, you'll get, really, one-on-one or much more, artisanal attention. And that happens in medicine, that happens in, many fields. And then the third future is, what I call a binary future where the machines are doing the thinking and the humans are doing the feeling. And that's something that some people say is a good thing. Like it at least gives us a role, and that role is connecting to each other. I'm increasingly noticing that I don't think Silicon Valley is like kind of obeying that distinction. Um, so I'm not sure about that future. We have to, as a culture, as a society, really like set out, like draw a line and say, this is what is reserved for us. This is a human thing that we value. And until we do that, there's going to be AI all over until we say, not here.
Capitalism has just fucked us. I mean, just like efficiency, the other thing that we need to roll back is convenience. Again, like back to independent bookstores. I always say, make me drive further, make me pay more. We need to create as a culture some sort of like quality of life index. Do you know what
Hmm.
I mean?
Hmm.
We as capitalist culture, we always equate value with savings. That's not what value is. I mean,
Right.
you know what I'm saying? Like
Hmm.
Americans, we're not even materialists. People think we're a materialist culture. We're not. We're total abstractionists. We buy the menu. We don't. We're not eating the food. We're buying the menu. Now the French, who've got like 500 cheeses and want to shorten the work week, and they also have this cool thing. The dressing I notice about French people, they always like really sharp on Monday for the work day, but then they get a little sauce on their thing by Tuesday, and they maybe spot stain, but they're still wearing the same clothes by Friday. Quality clothes, mind you. But like these little human, we got to efficiency is just it's so overrated, and so is convenience. I mean, you lose the whole Zen quality of like, I love mowing lawns, right? I was a landscaper. Now, granted, I like mowing my own lawn better than some rich guy's lawn, but I enjoy the tactile. It's unless it's a like big hilly lawn that doesn't have straight lines, then it just drives you crazy where you're just like turning the. But if you're just mowing that sucker in lines, it's like it's tactile and pleasing, and there's so many small pleasures in our lives that I think we take for granted. To me, this is what being alive really is.
Hmm. I
These
mean, I
small
agree.
moments.
Yeah. I really hear what you're saying, especially since coming out of Silicon Valley, often the language is AI will free us up. That's how they sell it. It will free us up for more meaningful, practices, more meaningful work, more meaningful leisure. And when I talk to, scores of people who do this work, this connecting as a part of their labor, they talked about it like it was the most meaningful work they could imagine. They found it incredibly sustaining, and the idea that we're interested in automating that for more meaningful work when this is the most meaningful work that humans can do is connect to other humans and to offer them dignity and to help them understand themselves better and to have motivation and purpose and at the same time get some of those benefits for yourself. It's just I don't understand what we're freeing ourselves up for.
Well, I mean, look, I get run around to a lot of these sort of wealthy dog and pony shows because, so, like, among the ultra wealthy, as an artist, I am like, I'm kind of a unicorn. They're just
Mm.
fascinated because, like, "Oh,
Sure.
you do something? I just wake up in the morning and, my hedge fund makes me, $2,000,000." But, like, they are really the most you go to, like, Telluride or something, and you hang around these people, and you realize that they're really fucking helpless. Like, they can't even call a cab by themselves, and they would be the last ones to accept AI because they sort of I mean, I know I have obviously a really low opinion of really wealthy people. Sorry, it's probably held me back from making money, but they almost seem to want that human dynamic because it's hierarchical for them. Like I'm me and you're down here. That doesn't work with a robot. They almost seem to need to sort of demean other people. See what I mean? I have a really low opinion of
Yeah. No, I mean, absolutely. And I actually had an opportunity to talk to a billionaire while I was doing this research. I was kind of presenting it at a lunch or something, and his question was, "Aren't they all performing?" And, he was talking about, the therapist, the teacher, the whatever, like I was presenting this connective labor as this, deeply meaningful practice where they're offering another human dignity and feeling their own humanity. And it is, a love letter to connective labor on some level. And I say that knowing that there are problems and we can get into the problems. But the problem that he was experiencing was that everyone was performing, and that was my first
wow, that he lacked empathy.
clue well, I don't know lacking empathy, I was just thinking about all that money really distorts the social environment, so he can't tell whether people are performing around him, and I think probably a lot of people are
'Cause
performing
they're
around
sucking
him.
up, you mean, for
Or, yeah, I just think you have that much money, just destroys, it really, you know it's like a neutron bomb on a social environment where it's the only thing people can see, and I think that does probably make it confusing about who's authentic and makes authenticity feel like it's, something you can get for a price. It just kind of messes everything up, and, it's a world most of us don't have to experience that, and that most of the rest of us don't have to be like, "Are they just performing?"
yeah, money d I mean, vast amounts of wealth obviously changes people. I remember seeing interviews with Jeff Bezos, who I had dinner with once, I'll tell you about that. Uh, I remember seeing this video of him, like, 20 years ago, and he's driving around in, like, some schlumpy jacket, and he's driving an old Subaru, and he's telling it's like a local regional news guy interviewing him because he's this successful startup on the East Side, and he's like, "Oh, well, I just drive this car because it's fine, it works fine, I do" and now the guy's just, like, got collagen, and he's, like, all fucking roided up.
Yeah.
I had dinner with the guy with some writers, and they set me right next to him because 'cause I'm an affable guy that figured but I was also the only writer that really realized what a danger Amazon posed to independent booksellers. Because 'cause I'm like, I started as a bookseller. A lot of writers don't sort of make that connection. Amazon's just trying to put everybody out of business. And so, like, it was kind of a strange choice to have me put it but me and Pat DeWitt all night long were just trying to fuck with the guy, and it just didn't work. We'd be like, Jeff, save some salt for everybody else, "Oh, don't drink all the water, Jeff," and he'd be fucking high-fiving that shit. Like, it's just like the hot seat was like a butt massage to that guy. He was just so I don't know if he was a megalomaniac or whatever, but I don't he just it didn't seem like the guy from 20 years earlier in the Subaru. Like something had changed.
Yeah.
One of your case studies was a Dutch supermarket chain called Jumbo, who instituted some really cool policies, which served as sort of an antidote to the dehumanizing effect of automation.
It's how I start my conclusion, and it talks about I talk about the, innovation they had where they had all these self-checkout machines if you want them, and then if you don't want them, they have something called the chat checkout where, it's a person, and they're waiting for you, and they're gonna talk to you while they, ring you up and bag your bag your belongings, etc. And to me, it was like a perfect example of the binary future where it's like, the machines are gonna just do this, but then over here for those who care, we're gonna put the humans. And I think that's maybe of those 3 futures I mentioned, maybe that's the best one because humans kind of, there's still a place for them, but I do
Still
see
kind of
the
sounds like a vegan option though, you know
the
what I mean? It's still
cost.
kind of it's sort of a other, I guess I didn't realize how much that it was still that many self-checkout. I was thinking that
Yeah, no, it's mostly self-checkout with just, like, a couple over there, and actually the way they sell it really is they say, "Oh, this is for those, like the elderly, who might not be comfortable with the automated, experience." And so it's, like, almost like, I don't know, the marginalized will get this other option, you know, I you might say, like, "Why do we care about, supermarket checkout? What has that got to do with connective labor? That's not where I'm going for my therapy," you know? But the interesting thing is that, just about 100 a little over 100 years ago, there was connective labor coming out of your grocery clerk. He was a man, and he knew who you were, knew who you were buying for, knew you came in last week, you're gonna come in next week. That was a relationship, and then what happened is around 1920 was invented the modern, grocery store where the shoppers were let loose and could then, choose what they wanted off the shelves, and then they would bring it up to the cashier, and the cashier became a kind of much more routinized, standardized experience over the next 80 years, and those jobs became female, and they also became ones that don't involve a lot of connection, and then they are increasingly scripted, and you have people with carpal tunnel syndrome, and you have,
yeah,
people
they
going,
always
"Do
have
you
the
want
wrist
paper or
guards. Yeah.
plastic?" And they always have their wrist guards, exactly, like, it's a job that's about, that's getting more and more standardized as they're trying to save labor costs, and so then you kinda go, "Well, what's the cost of automating that? What's wrong with self-checkout when the human part is almost roboticized itself?" And
But see,
so
I don't have that experience. I go to the store, I
ah,
have to feed 6 people, I cook for 6 people. I'm at the store every day because it's just too overwhelming to try to
yeah,
plan a menu for a week. I mean,
yeah,
I go every day. I always go to Jim's line. I will stand in Jim's line
yeah,
longer just to chat with him because he keeps chickens, he keeps hens, I keep hens, we talk about hens.
yeah, and you know
He
each
talks
other.
about he goes fishing and, like, Lon is our bagger, and he's this bearded guy with glasses, and he will step in and be a part of the conversation, and that's I have a repartee with these guys, and if
Yeah,
he's not there, I go see Linda. I mean, these people are I think these little relationships are completely underrated. I think they have
I
everything to
completely
do
agree.
with the idea of community. I think they have to do with our own sense of identity, and I mean, there is usefulness in small talk. I don't,
No, I completely agree. What I was just describing was kind of a futuristic, supermarket that is, I think, common, but there are other kinds like yours which are more humane and more about that, like, kind of momentary, fleeting, but still important connection, and it's true, it's been proven. There's this great psychological research, done by this woman, Gillian Sandstrom in, England, who who, uh kind of measured people before and after they first she divided people into whether or not they were going to have an efficient transaction with their barista or whether they were going to allow for kind of more of the give and take like you described with Jim. And then she measured their well-being before and after and found that those who have that conversation, who take the time to do it, actually show well-being effects.
Yeah,
And
I'm
so
sure endorphins,
it's
just those little
true.
exchanges, or just a
Yeah.
smile. I mean, you walk down
Yeah.
the street smiling, people smile back. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's not something people tend to, quantify very well, but, like,
Right.
it's really these are these little things about being human that it's really dehumanizing.
Yeah.
I think, you seem optimistic to me. I'm doggedly optimistic. It's hard to be, but why do you believe or do you believe that this connective work will endure even with the rise of the automaton?
Yeah. I mean, that to me is the question of our time. And I wrote this book so that people could kind of give a name to it, to talk about it with each other, to value it, to kind of, kind of I'm of the mind that I don't think you can protect something or take action around something unless it has a name that we can agree on. And
Yes, words matter.
yeah, I think words really matter. So am I an optimist about that? I am not sure. I was, I would say. I have all the fervor of an evangelist about it, but I as Silicon Valley has turned its attention to kind of the personal and friends and therapists, the rise of ChatGPT and Claude and all the others have made this terrain really have really entered this terrain. And, I read, Mark Zuckerberg talking about, how Meta AI was gonna, kind of help Americans make the friends that they need. Americans have 3 friends, they have a need for 15. We will be your other 12. And I'm worried. I'll say that. I'm no longer quite as optimistic as I was before because I see that this is a huge industry and they're, powered by billions of dollars and they are aiming right at this. And we are vulnerable because we assume computers are safe and not judgmental and friendly and available all the time and it's good enough. And, we don't have a sense of how important these connections are. So I
Yeah,
worry
well,
about
more
it.
than anything else, I think that we can agree that, like, social networks have been the main dividing factor politically. What I mean? I
Uh-huh.
growing up, I didn't know my neighbors, the Marshalls, next door neighbors. I went to, they took me camping with them. I played Little League with their ki I had no idea if they're Democrats or Republicans. I
Yeah,
really
yeah, yeah, yeah.
with retrospect, I'm thinking maybe Republicans, but my fiscal Republicans, I don't know, but it was never
Yeah.
and these were people we interacted with every day, and I think that with the media and social network has isolated us by really giving all the play to the fringes, right? Like, so it's all
Mhm.
about, like, pretty far out identity politics or, gun rights or something like that. And so,
Mhm.
this is completely I still have I have a great relationship with Facebook because for me, it's very human still because it's like I play Little League with these guys over here. This was
Yeah.
like people from every job I've ever had. I've got my writer friends, I've got all my old bandmates, friends from the music scenes,
Yeah.
all these different it has been kind of a wonderful tool for me personally because I don't have time to manage 5,000 people, but I really have that many friends. I'm a friendly person. And once
Mm.
I've, broken bread with you or had a beer, I develop intimacy quick. I care about these people. And
Yeah.
so this allows me to sort of follow, oh my God, I heard you had maybe I don't see him for 9 months and I run him in the store
Yeah.
and I go, I heard you had some problems with your pancreas. I'm
Yeah.
glad to hear, and I can't
Yeah.
keep track of them. I think that some people tend to concentrate on what you don't want to do is go to like a public sponsored thing, like a Neil deGrasse Tyson thing where there's gonna be like and then people will just there's just waiting yeah, troll people are just waiting to just be mean. Um,
The trouble is that I agree with you about, how it can be a great for connecting you with people, long lost friends, etcetera. But the problem is that they're trying to sell it, sell you the experience that makes you stay on longer. And people have found that when they are upset, when it makes them, engaged, and it taps into fear or taps into anger, they're more likely to stay on. So you may think, I'm just here for my friends, and your listeners might be like, I just have my little groups and they're good. But you know that when you get on, it also is trying to tap into whatever made you stay on long last time. So if you looked at, like, say, I don't know, it's just starting to put in, it has been for some time, put in posts that are not from your people and
oh yeah, mostly.
trying to attract
Yeah.
your attention to those, and so it's just no longer what it used to be. Mhm.
Yeah, well, money ruins everything. I remember when the
Yeah.
internet was really, just a sort of beautiful horizontal, Wild West wilderness where you could hang up a shingle and sort out your own demand, but yeah, god dang it. Oh, you talk a lot about slow work. So, I mean, maybe first kinda describe to us this idea of the slow work, like longer medical appointments you describe,
Mm.
and whether or not you think this could even be scaled to a capitalist economy.
Mhm. I mean, okay, so first, um, like, what am I talking about? It's kind of what you were saying earlier about, being more critical about efficiency as the be all end all, um, and trying to point to other kinds of value. So I found people like I was lucky enough to observe in a clinic for people who had terrible relationships with medicine, like who had multiple diagnoses and who had felt betrayed by medicine before in some way. And they were frequent users of the emergency room and they were, they were costing their employer a lot of money. And so the employer who was their insurer, uh, also, allowed or created this clinic that really addressed their need for a relationship. And the kind of upshot from this experiment is that it really worked. And so that this clinic had 2-hour first time appointments where you had like a half an hour with the medical assistant before and after, and an hour with your primary care physician. And the medical assistant also, it was a kind of beefed up job where it had more responsibility and they had more training. And so you had this intense attention and a real connection to people. And instead of, I think I remember something like instead of 25 people or 20 people, the doctor would see 6 in a day. And one of the fascinating things is the patients would go to a specialist, right? These were all their primary care physicians, and then they would go see a specialist, and the medical assistant would go with them and then come back. So it was like really amazing how kind of closely held those patients were. It turns out, I mean, your listeners are probably like, yeah, in what universe is that going to save money? But it turns out it did because they didn't go to the ER anymore.
Other
'Cause
6
they
trips.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, they had this, like they had somebody there to kind of decode medical knowledge for them and also really see them,
Exactly.
when they were in the midst of their having these medical health problems. And so that combination made it really work in ways that kind of our contemporary fragmented, busy, very super efficient, or maybe not really that efficient, but anyway, kind of funneling people through that medical system wasn't working for those people. And this one was. So it really felt like you could scale up that slow work when it was more effective than what we
Yeah,
were
and
offering people
I'm kind of
normally.
a counterintuitive personality, so I always kind of see that. Like, I mean, you can either do a half-assed job and have to do it over 3 times. But I guess
Mhm.
the question remains is that how can we shift workplace cultures to value, like, emotional intelligence and value slow work? I mean, what policy changes, would you advocate for to support I mean, I guess you'd have to get them with data and say, "Look, we did to 6 people instead of 25." You have to probably sell it to them in their own language.
It's kind
You
of
know
an
what I mean?
interesting question, like, is m is the problem here that we don't know? And I actually don't think that's true. Like, I wrote this book. There's a ton of research out there in each individual field, in medicine, in teaching, in therapy, and others that the relationship matters for the outcomes we care about. One of my favorites is a very incredibly rigorous study, a meta study where they like collected all these different studies to look at the impact of the doctor-patient relationship on health and well-being. And they found that it has a greater impact than smoking, than smoking or no, sorry, that's a different study that was on like, kind of your, social relations. This one found it had a greater the doctor-patient relationship had a greater impact than taking a daily aspirin for averting, heart attacks. And how many people do you know that do that? Like, I know a ton of people who take a daily aspirin. Maybe it's because I'm, over 50 and that's who I know. But yeah, this is like people take an aspirin to ward off heart attack, and the impact of a doctor-patient relationship on health and well-being is stronger than that. So I don't know that we're missing the data. I actually think that there are things we can do, and I kind of try to spell that out in the book. I say, first of all, here are ways organizations can do this better, and I talk about how how to do a kind of culture that, values and makes room for connective labor, and I talk about making time and allotting money for it, and I talk about how you need to have mentors and you need to have sounding boards and you need to have processing, you need a visionary leader, like I have it all out for the organization. For us as a society, it's trickier because or I don't know, trickier, but I have kind of some graduated ideas. Like at the very least, we need to, make it transparent whether you're interacting with an AI or a human being, because right now they don't even have to tell you that, and that's taking the choice away from us, so we can't even choose. So that's the first thing, is I want it to be required that whether you're interacting with a human being or a bot. But second of all, I want us to regulate. I'm sorry, that language. I want us to regulate Silicon Valley so
You
that
say regulation, I think jobs, so I'm okay with it. Just we were
okay.
talking
Well,
about
anyway,
saving jobs here.
yeah, I mean, I want us to spell out that, we want, to be careful, to be cautious about automating human relationship. I think we're kind of it's a wild west out there, and I think in, like, 10 years, we're gonna look back and be like, "Oh my god, I can't believe we let ourselves do that." I think can we can we have some respect for the human to human connection and build some guardrails to preserve that? Because otherwise, we're gonna kind of go down this path of, kind of automated, depersonalized, kind of alienating experience and an increasing lack of connection. And some of these kind of results that we've been talking about, political fragmentation, the sense of feeling invisible, the sense that you no longer want to be near your neighbors, like the sense of other people as dangerous, as overly political, the collapse of democracy or the fragmentation of your community of democracy. Like these are things that matter, and they come from us, these building blocks of us seeing each other, of us connecting in ways that are not about politics, but instead just in everyday life.
And
And we
what's
need to preserve
frightening
that. Yeah.
Yeah, and what's frightening about this is these are not just natural offshoots of the technology itself. There's an element of that for sure, but they're engineered. The people instituting these things know that that's exactly what it does, that it divides people, that's the thing is that there's the technology itself naturally does that, but then it's in nefarious hands, it becomes a weapon.
Yeah, or even like, I mean, there are certainly dark characters out there, dark actors out there, but I would say even in hands that only wanna make a buck. And that's what they're doing. They're basically monetizing or, commodifying our, fear of interaction, our fear of the chaotic judgmental other, our need for convenience or our, desire for convenience or efficiency, and that by commodifying it, you're gonna cripple it.
Yeah, well, you're gonna I mean, at best, it's gonna end up at this binary model you talked about where, like,
Yeah.
only the wealthy people are going to be able to get that soul food that they need by interacting with people, and everybody else, like, pretty much every other resource out there is fucked. Um, I'm just thinking of my kids here, like, Jason, my producer and I, we both have school-age kids. He's doing the college tour thing. My kids are a little younger. I got a freshman and a 6th grader and a 1st grader, but, last week's guest, Jim Thompson, said, if he could go back, he's a guy he's a friend of mine who's having a midlife crisis because he's had to pivot away from his creative job because the jobs are going away and so forth. And he said if he could go back, he was a newspaper guy. Um, He said if he could go back and give himself one piece of advice as a young man before he chose a career, it would be to try to look down the line and imagine what that job would look like in 20 years. And this becomes increasingly harder because culture and technology accelerate. I mean, what kind of human connective jobs do you imagine will still be out there for our kids? And can you imagine a new sort of connective job that maybe springs from this problem?
Okay, I have a lot of
Sorry.
opinions about this actually
That's
because
that's
I'm
a
a
lot of
college
questions at
professor.
once. I
No,
apologize.
it's fine, it's fine.
Mhm.
I'm a college professor, and so I see kids and their parents yearning for, a clear sense of the job that they'll be able to get in 20 years or in 10 years that they'll still have in 20. And I'm just saying, I'm here to tell you that anyone who suggests that they'll be able to tell you that is lying. There is no way to know what the jobs of the future. That's the era we live in, the era of the agricultural era, when we knew what you needed to know, and your dad knew what you needed to know to survive. You just need to copy him and be a good learner there. That's that era is essentially over. Instead, what we have is the need for you to have flexible, be adaptable, be critical. And these are kind of fuzzy, hard to kind of prepare for. But I'm telling you, there is a curriculum for that. A curriculum for the human value that we add to a machine world is one that values connection, that has accentuated social skills, and that is has this kind of flexible, adaptable, creative, kind of critical thinking. And who teaches that? I'm sorry, that's not coding. That's not, I don't know, finance or whatever. That's not like kind of these very practical skills that are kind of very popular today because people think that it's the way to get hired. It might be the way to get hired right this second, but the thing that ChatGPT does well is code. So I'm not saying that, I'm not saying anything radical there. Instead, the best thing for a student going into college is to get these human qualities. And how to do that, I'm sorry, liberal arts. That's like English, history,
Never
like,
apologize. You're talking to a writer. Yeah,
I mean,
keep
it's
going. Sing it
these
from
are
the mountain. You've got
this
the
is
floor. Keep
this
talking.
is this is not rocket science. This is instead like, kind of using your critical, interpretive kind of skills, accentuating the capacity to deal with other people, get into as many group projects, which students hate, get into as many group projects as you can, try psychology, try, you know, and I'm not anti-science. I actually think science and its capacity for kind of instilling rigorous habits of thinking is a good thing. But what I'm saying is, don't go don't go into college thinking that you're going to get a ticket to a job that's going to be around for 30 years. That's just not happening. And instead, try and instill habits that humans provide uniquely. And at this point, we're talking about human connection. So that means social skills, and that means sociology. That means, psychology. That means English. That means history. That means anthropology. These kind of standard liberal arts curriculums for sure. I feel really strongly about it.
Good. Well, that sounds like optimism a little bit. And it sounds like a perfect kind of summation place to end this. Allison, it's been just such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much. This has been enlightening. AI's obviously big subject, so I think this is like the first of many different conversations we're going to have about it. But this was such a great place for me to start. You've really helped me. You've given me a language, I think, to talk to the next person I talk to AI about. So I appreciate
Great.
it very much.
Hope that's true.
She
Thank
is
you.
Allison Pugh. Check out the book, people. Where'd my notes go? The Last Human Job,
Mhm.
The Work of Connecting in a Disconnected World. Thank you, Allison Pugh, for being our fresh face in hell today.
Thanks so much.
A Fresh Face in Hell with Jonathan Evison is brought to you by Fresh Face Pods and produced by Jason Botkin and yours truly. Check us out on Instagram, YouTube, or at our website at freshfacepods.tv. Don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter for updates and special content. And if you love the podcast, by all means, run out and buy all of Jonathan Evison's award-winning novels wherever books are sold.